Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Wednesday the 27th of April 2022. News. Ministers told to release legal advice on planned independence vote. This article is by Kathleen Nutt. Ministers have been ordered to release legal advice on IndyRef 2 after losing a battle over freedom of information. The move follows a watchdog ruling. The government breached transparency legislation by withholding documents from the press and the public. The Scottish Information Commissioner, Darren Fitzhenry, said decisions relating to the publication of legal advice made during the Alex Salmond inquiry in Holyrood and the obvious and significant public interest on the proposed vote means some of the material should be handed over. They have been given to June the 10th this year to release documents to the public, according to the Scotsman. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon wants to pass legislation in Holyrood allowing IndyRef 2 to take place by the end of 2023, COVID permitting, and has instructed civil servants to update the blueprint for independence. It is not known when the bill will be introduced. Her plan follows the refusal by Boris Johnson to agree to transfer powers to the Scottish Parliament to hold a legally watertight referendum, which was the process followed ahead of the 2014 vote. However, constitutional lawyers are split over whether the Scottish Parliament has the power to pass such legislation, with many believing the legality of the referendum bill will be challenged by the UK government in the Supreme Court. Ahead of the Holyrood election in May last year, the Scottish Government was forced to release legal advice relating to their unsuccessful defence against the judicial review brought by the former First Minister over their investigation into complaints of sexual harassment, which Mr Salmond denied. The Scottish Government admitted its probe was unlawful, unfair and tainted by apparent bias, leading to a Holyrood investigation into what went wrong. During this probe, ministers were forced to release the legal advice they were given during their investigation into the complaints made against Mr Salmond. In his ruling, Mr Fitzhenry said that the decision to release legal advice from the investigation into the complaints against Mr Salmond demonstrated ministers recognised there could be compelling public interest reasons for disclosure of legal advice. He concluded aspects of the legal advice on IndyRef 2 would fall under the same exceptional circumstances in which public interest outweighed legal professional privilege. The government had been initially asked for any legal advice to ministers or provided by the civil service on the topic of a second independence referendum in 2020 by the Scotsman. The Herald also submitted a Freedom of Information request to ministers to obtain any legal advice they had received on IndyRef 2, but officials refused to release any information to both papers, claiming disclosure would breach legal professional privilege, a convention that ensures confidentiality of legal advice. Mr Fitzhenry accepted the considerable inbuilt public interest in allowing ministers to receive full unhindered legal advice. However, he agreed with submissions from the Scotsman that this was not inalienable, adding the Scottish Ministerial Code sets out there are exceptions to this convention, including when the legal advice may affect a large number of people. Mr Fitzhenry wrote, "The Commissioner notes the applicant's view that keeping legal advice relating to a second independence referendum secret actively harms accountability and scrutiny and would be counter to the public interest. Given the fundamental importance of Scotland's future constitutional relationship to all individuals living in Scotland and its fundamental importance to political and public debate at the time of the request and requirement for review, the Commissioner is satisfied that disclosing this information would significantly enhance public debate on this issue. While the ministers have expressed concern that disclosure of legal advice in this case would have the effect of future legal advice being more circumspect or less effective, the Commissioner acknowledges the point made by the applicant that the minister's own decision to disclose legal advice relating to the Alex Salmond case has already created such an environment. If the risk were there, and a further disclosure of legal advice, which is of much greater public interest, is unlikely to create any further difficulty. Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservatives, said the Commissioner's decision was a devastating rebuke to the Scottish Government. The failed attempt by Nicola Sturgeon and co to hush this up is just the latest example of a government prepared to go to any lengths to avoid scrutiny, he added. Sarah Boyack, the Constitution spokesperson for Scottish Labour, said this ruling is another rebuke for the secretive SNP government who've been caught once again trying to withhold information and stifle scrutiny. The public have a right to see this information about their future, and the SNP must release it right away. But more importantly, they must stop wasting time, energy and money on this separatist distraction. People in Scotland need their government to be focused on recovering from the pandemic and tackling the cost of living crisis, not tying themselves in legal knots in an attempt to hide the holes in their case for a divisive referendum. The Scottish Government spokesperson said, "We have received the decision from the Scottish Information Commissioner and are considering its terms. However, we are clear the Scottish Government has acted lawfully in its application of freedom of information legislation. There is a long-standing convention observed by UK governments and Scottish governments that government does not disclose legal advice, including whether law officers have or have not advised on any matter, except in exceptional circumstances. The content of any such advice is confidential and subject to legal professional privilege. This ensures that full and frank legal advice can be given. The SNP government has been told it must publish legal advice it received about a second referendum on leaving the UK in a ruling from the Information Commissioner. Pamela Nash, Chief Executive of Scotland and Union, said the SNP administration is renowned for its secretive behaviour, so this is a vital ruling that must lead to some much-needed transparency from ministers. But the people of Scotland do not want a second referendum anytime soon, and the SNP government should end its obsession with trying to divide us again. The last thing that Scotland needs as we recover from COVID and face a cost of living crisis is a legal battle over the Constitution, which would cost millions of pounds and place a huge strain on civil servants. The government's entire focus should be on what really matters to people, improving our schools and hospitals, investing in community services and tackling climate change. This article is by Kathleen Nutt. The Herald, Wednesday the 27th of April 2022. News. PMQs. 3 Tory ministers face sack in sexual misconduct probes. This article is by Kathleen Nutt. 3 Tory cabinet ministers could lose their jobs for sexual misconduct if complaints against them are upheld, MPs have heard. The Prime Minister was told 56 MPs, including 3 members of his own cabinet, were currently under investigation by the House of Commons for sexual misconduct. The names of those under investigation were not given to MPs. Boris Johnson was given the update by the Green MP Caroline Lucas in the Commons chamber this afternoon. She asked him if the complaints against the ministers were upheld whether this would be grounds for them to be sacked. Ms Lucas raised the issue at Prime Minister's questions this afternoon, 3 days after an unnamed Tory was condemned for making a basic instinct slur about Angela Rayner. The remarks by the unknown Conservative have been widely attacked, including by Mr Johnson. The MP told the Commons 56 members of this House are under investigation for sexual misconduct, and that includes 3 of his cabinet ministers. The Prime Minister has said there can be no place for sexism and misogyny in this House. So can he now confirm whether he considers whether sexual harassment, apparently unlike bullying and lying, is grounds for dismissal under the Ministerial Code? Mr Johnson said, of course sexual harassment is intolerable, and it's quite right that members should now have a procedure to which members can now bring that to the attention of the authorities, and that is a good thing. It is grounds for dismissal. The exchange comes after the Sunday Times reported at the weekend that the 56 MPs had been referred to the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, ICGS, over about 70 separate complaints. The allegations involving the 56 include making sexually inappropriate comments and more serious wrongdoing. At least one complaint is believed to involve criminality and concerns an allegation that an MP bribed a member of staff in return for sexual favours, it was reported. Earlier today, at Prime Minister's questions, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer called on Mr Johnson to agree there was no place for misogyny in modern Britain. Sir Keir said, I know the Prime Minister will have whipped his backbenchers to scream and shout, and that is fine. But I hope he has also sent a clear message that there is no place for sexism and misogyny or looking down on people because of where they come from in his party, in this House, or in modern Britain. Mr Johnson replied that he had exchanged messages with Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner at the weekend after a Mail on Sunday article about her. He added, I repeat what I said to her. There can be absolutely no place for such behaviour or such expression in this House, and we should treat each other frankly with the respect that each other deserves. Ms Rayner has criticised the Daily Mail for suggesting I somehow enjoy being subjected to sexist slurs during the row over comments made by Tory MPs. She tweeted, as women, we sometimes try to brush aside the sexism we face, but that doesn't make it okay. The Mail implies today that I somehow enjoy being subjected to sexist slurs. I don't. They are mortifying and deeply hurtful. She loves it really is a typical excuse so many women are familiar with, but it can't be women's responsibility to call it out every time. I don't need anyone to explain sexism to me. I experience it every day. Boris Johnson gave assurances he would unleash the terrors of the earth on the Tory MPs spreading this vile sexism. I hope to hear what he'll be doing about it today. This article is by Kathleen Nutt.
Recorded from the Herald on the 27th of April 2022, from the sports section. Aberdeen starlet Calvin Ramsey named Scottish Football Writers Young Player of the Year, by Frank Gilfeather. Calvin Ramsey's list of admirers grows daily, with any number of Premier League clubs south of the border ready to go to auction for him in the summer. Liverpool remain favourites for his signature, and with teenage Aberdeen defenders citing Anfield's Trent Alexander-Arnold as his leading influence, it was perhaps the biggest of hints that Merseyside might be his next destination as the England star's understudy. Ramsey, 18, named the Scottish Football Writers Young Player of the Year, has enjoyed a meteoric rise in this his first full season in the Premiership, as clubs like Tottenham, Leicester City, Manchester United and Newcastle are ready to engage in a bidding war for his services. And Leeds United are also preparing to throw their hat into the ring for a player for whom the Dons turned down a £4.8 million deal from Serie A side Bologna in January. He said, there's some big players, great players who have won the award, and it's just a massive achievement for me really. It's been a really good season really, not for the club obviously, we know we needed to do better. But on a personal note, coming in for my first full season in professional football, I think I've done well. I've enjoyed and to get to this award has topped it off really. My dad Graham has helped me a lot, as well as players like Alexander Arnold, Kyle Walker, all those top players. I like to watch videos of them and try and base my game on them, but when I was youngster growing up, my dad definitely helped me a lot to get to where I am. Like Alexander Arnold, Ramsey started out as a midfielder in youth football until he was given the role of right back against Chelsea during a tournament in Holland. In centre mid, you have to be technically good, he insisted, and Alexander Arnold is technically good. He moved to right back and is good at going forward and good defensively. As a fullback, watching Trent and his crosses and his technical ability, if I can get to that level, then it would be a bonus. If I can be half the player of him, I will be laughing. But I'm still an Aberdeen player. I've still got to focus on the 4 games left this season and keep putting in good performances. We'll see where it takes me in the summer. Those are the kind of words to encourage Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp, who could be forgiven for believing the youngster is pitching for the opportunity to learn from his defensive hero at Anfield. Although the Aberdonian, who has the most assists of any teenage defender in world football, did not discount playing abroad. He said, "If you come into the first team and play well like I have, anything can happen." The likes of Aaron Hickey came in at Hearts, he did well and got a big move to Serie A, and he's been brilliant, scoring goals and everything. Andy Robertson at Liverpool and Tierney at Arsenal have been brilliant, and they're players I look up to, especially as they are fullbacks like me. I've seen what they've done, and I feel I could go on to do that as well. That article was by Frank Gilfeather, recorded from the Herald on the 27th of April 2022. From the sports section, Nordic broadcaster Viaplay seal exclusive Scotland broadcast rights under UEFA sale, by David Irvin. Nordic broadcaster Viaplay will exclusively broadcast Scotland national team fixtures from 2024 to 2028. The deal, under UEFA's centralised National Association media rights sales process, will see all of Scotland's European qualifiers for World Cup 2026 and Euro 2028, UEFA Nations League fixtures and any friendly shown by Viaplay. The Scottish FA announced the new deal this morning and confirmed positive initial dialogue with UEFA and Viaplay has been had over making some matches free to air under the arrangement. Viaplay will launch in the UK in the second half of this year with a broad streaming offering that combines live sports with premium original content. The SFA added in the release that broadcast arrangements for national team fixtures in both the Nations League and Euro 2024 qualifiers from June 2022 and to 2024 are ongoing. An update is expected in the near future. Scottish FA Chief Executive Ian Maxwell said, "We are pleased that Viaplay recognise the value of the Scotland's men's national team and look forward to them broadcasting what will hopefully be yet more successful qualification campaigns for this current Scotland side. The guaranteed income that we receive through UEFA's centralised media rights sales allow us to continue to grow the national game. The finances help us to invest in a multitude of areas, including the grassroots games, girls and women's football, coach education, and para-football, helping us harness the power of football to grow and develop the game." That article was by David Irvin.
Herald Scotland recorded on Wednesday 27th of April 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Doctor Strange vs Saudi Arabia. Why the Marvel movie has been asked to make cuts, by Teddy Jameson, senior features writer. Doctor Strange may be more familiar battling sorcerers, demons from other dimensions and eldritch gods, but his latest enemy is an Arab censor. Saudi Arabia has asked Disney, who own Marvel Studios, to cut LGBTQ references from the new film Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. What's all this fuss about? In the new film, a lesbian character played by the actor Xochitl Gomez refers at one point to her two moms. The General Supervisor of Cinema Classification in Saudi Arabia, Nawaf Al-Sawan, has revealed that he asked Disney to cut the reference so the film could be shown in Saudi Arabia, but Disney has refused. Homosexuality remains a capital offence in Saudi Arabia. What must they have made of Brokeback Mountain? But Saudi Arabia only lifted a ban on cinemas in the kingdom as recently as 2017, one that had been in operation for decades. But this must have happened before. Yes, and on another Marvel movie. Last year, the film The Eternals, which featured amongst its characters a gay couple, prompted a request from Saudi Arabia for cuts to be made. Disney refused and the film was not shown in the kingdom. Is this only happening in Saudi Arabia? No, there are reports that Kuwait and Qatar have banned the new Doctor Strange film, and that the movie will not be screened in Egypt. Other countries, including Malaysia and China, have also banned or censored Hollywood films that included LGBTQ content in the past. One imagines American studios don't want to lose the Chinese box office, though. Indeed, it's a $1 billion market for Hollywood, which may be why it sometimes trims its sails when it comes to Chinese concerns. In 2020, the free speech charity PEN America suggested American studios were self-censoring their films to placate Chinese sensibilities. Indeed, the first Doctor Strange film in 2016 was accused of whitewashing one of its main characters by casting Tilda Swinton in the role of the Ancient One, a character that was Tibetan in the original comic book story. The author of the report, James Tager, said at the time, "Our biggest concern is that Hollywood is increasingly normalising preemptive self-censorship in anticipation of what the Beijing censor is looking for." There is nothing new about censorship, is there? Not at all. The story of cinema could be told through the story of cinema censors, with sex and violence being the usual reasons for censorship in the UK and the US. Films ranging from Phantom of the Opera in 1925 and Freaks in 1932 to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Pier Paolo Pasolini's notorious Salò all faced bans in the UK. Meanwhile, controversial movies as disparate as Monty Python's Life of Brian and David Cronenberg's Crash were barred from being shown in some cinemas on their release. When does this Doctor Strange movie come out anyway? It will be in the UK cinemas from May 4. By Teddy Jameson.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 28th of April 2022. From the news section, Labour MP suspended from Commons for bullying staff, by Andrew Learmonth. Labour MP Liam Byrne looks set to be suspended from the Commons for 2 days after Parliament's watchdog said he was guilty of bullying a former member of staff. Parliamentary Standards Commissioner Catherine Stone said his behaviour was a significant misuse of power. According to the BBC, David Barker complained to the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, ICGS, about the MP 2 years ago following a minor disagreement about food bank collections. He was then sent home and subsequently ignored by Mr Byrne. Mr Barker said he was subsequently signed off work with stress on 4th of June. He said the Birmingham Hodge Hill MP had made no efforts to contact him before being told a month later that his contract would not be renewed. The independent experts panel, which considered the punishment, said the Birmingham Hodge Hill MP abused his position of power and ostracised the staff member by ceasing personal contact with him for several months and denying him access to his parliamentary IT account. The panel said Mr Byrne sought to present his actions as a reasonable HR strategy, but added, "We disagree, it was bullying." He should, as he now accepts, have tackled any misconduct through a proper disciplinary process, not by ostracising the complainant. The panel recommended that Mr Byrne should be suspended for 2 sitting days on the condition that he also makes a written apology to the complainant and undertakes training and take action to address the causes of his behaviour and weaknesses in the management of his office. Mr Byrne said he had apologised for the complainant in his case, and the situation had been a valuable lesson for me and one I am determined to learn. In a statement, he said, "I am extremely grateful to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards and to the Independent Expert Panel for their thorough investigation and careful judgment. I am very lucky to work with an amazing, happy team of people who together have almost 40 years of combined service to my constituents in our Westminster and Hodge Hill offices, where we're determined to provide the best possible service and voice what is the most income-deprived constituency in England." However, 2 years ago, at the beginning of lockdown, following a workplace dispute that led me to send the complainant home, I did not resolve the dispute correctly with a proper disciplinary process, and having nevertheless extended the complainant's contract, thereby failed to fulfil my obligations as an employer and Parliament's behaviour code. This constituted an ostracism, which was a breach of Parliament's behaviour code, which I strongly support, and caused distress for which I am profoundly sorry. I have apologised in full to the individual concerned. I am incredibly grateful to the panel for recognising the genuine remorse I felt about the impact on the individual concerned. the steps I've already taken to ensure this never happens again, along with the work still to do, and for concluding I did not deliberately act to delay the investigation. This has been a valuable lesson for me and one I'm determined to learn as me and my team seek to offer the best possible service and voice for the residents of Hodge Hill. A party spokesman said, "The Labour Party fully supports the recommendations of this independent report, including the proposed sanction." And that was an article by Andrew Learmonth. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 28th of April 2022, from the news section, Shell fined £50,000 for breaching production consents. This article is unattributed. Energy giant Shell has been fined £50,000 by North Sea regulators for breaching production consents. The North Seas Transition Authority, NSTA, requires the consents for companies to produce oil and gas. It has now fined Shell and served the company with a sanction notice for breaching 5 field consents. The NSTA said adhering to production consents is an indicator of good stewardship of fields and is an important component of a stable, well-regulated industry which has the trust and confidence of investors and the public. The NSTA raised concerns with Shell back in November 2020 that it had failed to comply with the maximum and minimum volume specified in the production consents for 5 North Sea fields that year. An investigation by the regulator confirmed the failure, with a review by Shell finding it failed to conduct an effective handover following a restructuring exercise. Tom Wheeler, Director of Regulation at the NSTA, said, "In this instance, Shell did not live up to its commitments and responsibilities in a way that could distract from the industry's social licence to operate. However, Shell did cooperate fully with the NSTA's investigation and is already implementing the recommendations from its internal review, dealing with the immediate causes of the failure to comply with production consents." The NSTA is committed to maintaining a stable and predictable system of regulation, which encourages investment in relevant activities, and is working with industry to ensure that compliance continues to improve. Earlier this year, Shell reported a 14-fold increase in quarterly profits, bringing their 2021 total profits to $19.3 billion, £15.5 billion. This comes as skyrocketing prices for oil and gas have pushed millions of households across the UK into fuel poverty, reigniting calls for a windfall tax to relieve the burden on households. And that article is unattributed. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 28th of April 2022, from the news section, Tory MP charged with failing to stop after a car crash, by Herald Scotland Online. Jamie Wallace, the Conservative MP for Bridgend, has been charged with failing to stop after a car crash in November last year. South Wales Police said the 37-year-old had also been charged with failure to report a road traffic collision, driving without due care and attention, and leaving a vehicle in a dangerous position following the crash in Llanbethian, Cowbridge, in the early hours of November the 28th. He is due to appear before Cardiff Magistrates Court on Tuesday, May the 10th. In March, Mr Wallace became the first MP to come out as trans. He was elected to represent Bridgend at the 2019 general election, unseating Labour for the first time in 3 decades. Prior to entering the Commons, he studied chemistry at Oxford University and was a director at data recovery firm Fields Associates. In a statement, South Wales Police said it had been investigating a road traffic collision which happened in Llanbethian, Cowbridge, in the early hours of Sunday, November the 28th, 2021. Jamie Wallace, 37, from Cowbridge, has been charged with failing to stop following a road traffic collision, failure to report a road traffic collision, driving without due care and attention, and leaving a vehicle in a dangerous position. And that report was by the Herald Scotland Online.
Recorded from the Herald on the 28th of April 2022, from the sports section, Rangers team news versus RB Leipzig as Giovanni Van Bronckhorst makes 5 changes, by Aidan Smith. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has named his Rangers team to take on RB Leipzig in the semi-finals of the Europa League. The Ibrox boss has made 5 changes to his side that defeated Motherwell in the Scottish Premiership last weekend. Calvin Bassey, John Ludstrom, Ryan Jack, Ryan Kent and Joe Aroba come into the side with Leon Balogun, Scott Arfield, Stephen Davis, Ahmed Diallo and Fashion Sakala dropping out. It looks as though Aroba will lead the Rangers line in a false nine formation with Kent and Wright supporting him in the attack. Rangers: McGregor, Tavernier, Bassey, Lundstrom, Goldston, Jack, Kent, Aribo, Kamara, Wright, Barisic. Subs: McLaughlin, McCrory, Balogun, King, Davis, Sands, Arfield, Lowry, Diallo, Sakala, McKinnon, Devine. Lepsvig: Galassi, Angelino, Adams, Klosterman, Sosbazola, Kunke, Halstenberg, Oma, Lamier, Vardiol, Henriks. Subs: Chonier, Martinez, Poulsen, Fosberg, Mukele, Andre Silva, Rayberga, Nova, Lil. That article was by Aidan Smith. Recorded from the Herald on the 28th of April 2022. From the sports section, UEFA considering fast-tracking Ukrainian sides into European group stages, by Ewan Payton. UEFA are said to be considering fast-tracking Ukraine clubs into the group stages of next season's Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League. And this will put Celtic, Rangers and Hearts on red alert as they wait to see if that will have an impact on their standings. Celtic look increasingly likely to lift this term's Scottish Premiership title. This will grant them automatic access to next season's Champions League group stages, assuming Villarreal don't win the tournament in this campaign. Rangers and Hearts are guaranteed group stage European football also in some capacity. Dnipro manager Igor Djokovic has revealed that UEFA are coming up with a plan for Ukrainian clubs to go straight into the groups. They currently sit below Scotland in the coefficient rankings, but if they are fast-tracked that could potentially mean Scotland misses out on their automatic spots. Djokovic said, "As far as I'm aware, a solution is constantly being sought, a way in which Ukrainian clubs could play in Europe, and the Ukrainian Federation and UEFA are in constant talks. There is now a proposal to allow Ukrainian clubs direct placement into the group stages of European competitions. The reason is that no one can play qualifiers in the war zone. We will see if it is possible to do such a thing. It would be a big exception, but with this concession, UEFA would help our clubs survive this difficult period by putting them directly into the group stages. It would be great motivation and comfort for us to know that the next season we will be heading directly into that stage of Europe." The article was by Ewan Payton.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 28th of April 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Dark Hunter by F.J. Watson. Book review by Alistair Mabbitt. Dark Hunter, F.J. Watson, Polygon, £8.99. Having distinguished herself as a medieval historian and biographer of Robert Bruce, the Perthshire-based F.J. Watson has channeled her historical knowledge into a murder mystery set in the period she knows best. Dark Hunter takes place in 1317, at the point when the Scots are once more gaining ground after the hammering they received from Edward I. Led by Bruce's son, Black Douglas, the Scots are marauding in the borders just as Sir Edmund Darrell, his Squire Will and 20-year-old trainee Squire Benedict Russell arrive at Berwick-upon-Tweed. "We're here to strike at the accursed Scots before they drive us into the sea," blusters Will. But without an army to back them up, there isn't a lot they can do, and the soldiers in the Berwick garrison must wait for word that the king is sending an army north. With each passing day, that seems less likely, and everyone is feeling vulnerable and on edge. Yorkshire lad Benedict never anticipated soldiering as a career path. He was supposed to be a clerk, and studied under monks at Gloucester Abbey. The death of his brother, however, has meant that Benedict is instead learning how to be a squire under Sir Edmund, who is pretty contemptuous of his lack of a practical ability and his fondness for book learning. All this changes in Berwick-upon-Tweed, where Benedict, who is good with numbers, works out that the Chamberlain is overcharging the soldiers, an offence serious enough to send a report to the king. So when the murdered body of young Alice Rydale is found outside the town's walls, Benedict is entrusted with the task of finding the culprit. "I think the world has gone completely mad," he says, "and in a town with no shortage of knights and burgesses, it does seem strange that a murder investigation should be entrusted to a lowly trainee squire, still some months short of his 21st birthday." He finds it difficult to exert any authority, particularly against Ralph Home, Berwick's richest merchant and former mayor, a coarse and cruel man who may have been in on the crime. The stakes increase when it looks as though there's not only a murderer in their midst, but he might be also a traitor who plans to open the town gates and let the Scots in when no one's looking. Given the urgency of the situation, it feels strange that Benedict should periodically grow weary of investigating and drop it for a while, seemingly to allow events in the outside world, letters flying back and forth to London, the progress of ships and papal negotiations, to catch up before the inevitable siege. The hunt takes up most of a year, and both Benedict and those who have entrusted him with the task seem inexplicably relaxed about getting results. Similarly, Benedict's romance with his love interest, Alice Rydale's sister Lucy, takes an age to get going. More convincing and engaging is Benedict's sense of responsibility for the gruesome and regrettable consequences of his investigation, which prevent him being too smug about his sleuthing skills. Set 10 years before the granddaddy of all medieval murder mysteries, The Name of the Rose, it's impossible not to notice echoes of the earlier book. Benedict isn't a monk, of course, but he's an inexperienced youth plucked from a sheltered abbey and dropped into an intimidating stronghold with a murder to solve, a cipher to decode, and his untested feelings about the opposite sex to grapple with. Fortunately, as in Umberto Eco's classic, a lifetime of extensive research has resulted in the firm grasp of period detail that makes Dark Hunter an immersive and entertaining read. By Alistair Mabbitt.
The Herald, Friday the 29th of April 2022. News. Decrease in number of empty shops as COVID restrictions ease. This article is by Jodie Harrison. The number of empty shops fell slightly in the first quarter of the year, buoyed by an easing of COVID restrictions, figures show. However, the Scottish Retail Consortium, SRC, highlighted that 1 in 6 Scottish retail stores still lies empty, describing it as a very vivid reminder of the heavy economic toll resulting from COVID and associated restrictions. Latest SRC data showed that in the first quarter of 2022, the Scottish shop vacancy rate decreased to 15.8%, down from 16.1% in quarter 4 of 2021. It was a 0.5 percentage points higher than the same point in 2021. Shopping centre vacancies decreased to 20.2% from 20.4% in quarter 4, while on the high street they dropped to 14.8% from 15% in the fourth quarter of 2021. Retail parks remained the location with the lowest vacancy rate, and saw these drop to 12% in quarter 1 2022, down from 12.6% in quarter 4 of last year. David Lonsdale, SRC Director, said buoyed by an easing of COVID restrictions and retailers' continued ability to trade, the shop vacancy rate saw a small but nonetheless welcome reduction in the first 3 months of this year. This was a second successive quarterly improvement and was an encouraging start to the year. That said, the vacancy rate remains over a fifth above pre-pandemic levels, and 1 in 6 Scottish retail stores still lies empty, a very vivid reminder of the heavy economic toll resulting from COVID and associated restrictions. Retail parks continue to fare relatively well, with shopping centres lagging. He said that the challenge for retail destinations will be turning this into a more sustained improvement in the months ahead, particularly as concerns over the cost of living show little sign of abating and retailers grapple with supply chain issues and cost rises. Mr. Lonsdale added, the health of Scotland's retail destinations is ultimately determined by the state of the overall economy and consumer sentiment. However, a sharper and more urgent focus from policymakers is required too. Lucy Staton, director of the local data company, welcomed the decrease. She said this decline in vacant space is being driven by further repurposing of retail space, growth in the independent sector, and an increase in activity across the chains as well, as many brands are back on the acquisition trail after the pandemic stalled growth. A Scottish Government spokesperson said it was encouraging to see the latest figures, showing the Scottish vacancy rate slightly decrease. Our new retail strategy sets out how we will work with businesses and trade unions to deliver a strong, prosperous and vibrant retail sector, and contains specific actions to strengthen retail's contribution to the economic and social success of our local communities. The Scottish Government is committed to helping businesses recover and has provided more than £4.7 billion in support since the beginning of the pandemic, including around £1.6 billion in rates relief, which includes a continuation of 50% retail, hospitality and leisure rates relief for the first 3 months of 2022-23, capped at £27,500 per ratepayer. This is in addition to the action we are taking to support the continued safe return to our town and city centres and help retailers and communities recover, not least through our £80 million COVID Economic Recovery Fund, our £6 million City Centre Recovery Fund, and the recently published Town Centre Action Plan. However, the biggest threat to retail recovery and consumers having income to spend is the cost of living crisis, and we will continue to press UK Government to do more to support people and businesses during what are very tough times, exacerbated by the impact of Brexit and the pandemic. This article is by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 29th of April 2022. News. Michelle Mone reports Tory peer's home raided over PPE contract investigation. This article is by Jodie Harrison. Tory peer Michelle Mone's home has been raided by police investigating a firm for £203 million of COVID PPE government contracts, it has been claimed. Lady Mone, 50, is believed to have been present at an address that was searched by officers from the National Crime Agency, who raided homes and offices in London and the Isle of Man. Lady Mone has a £25 million estate on the Isle of Man, as well as a home in Belgravia. It is unclear which address police visited. Officers are said to have been searching for documents that could assist an inquiry into suspected fraud offences. No arrests are believed to have been made. The Isle of Man police confirmed that it took part in coordinated raids on Wednesday. A spokesperson told the Mirror the Isle of Man Constabulary, in support of an ongoing NCA investigation, executed search warrants at 4 addresses in the Isle of Man. No arrests were made. Lady Mone from Glasgow has denied any involvement with a company called PPE MedPro, which was given government contracts along with another firm. However, it was revealed that she referred PPE Medro to the officer of fellow Tory peer Theodore Agnew, who at the time was a Cabinet Office Minister responsible for the procurement of PPE. The NCA is currently investigating the award of contracts for supplying surgical gowns and masks to the NHS. PPE Medro appeared on the VIP lane list of companies given greater chances of a PPE contract. It was added to the list by Lord Agnew's office. The firm, which is based in the Isle of Man, was formed in May 2020. A few weeks later, it was given a contract to supply 25 million sterile gowns and masks. Lady Mone was linked to the company by The Guardian. However, she made it clear she has no role in the company. In January, it emerged she had been referred to the House of Lords Commissioners for Standards. Labour peer George Folks and Lady Mone had failed to fully disclose her business interests in PPE MedPro and asked the commissioners to investigate whether she had breached the rules against lobbying when she referred the firm to the government. Lady Mone has repeatedly denied any association with the company, which she recommended to the Cabinet Office as a potential supplier in May 2020. Although she has no actual formal connections with the company, her denials have come under scrutiny thanks to publicly documented connections between Anthony Page, PPE MedPro's owner, and businesses run by Lady Moan and her husband, Isle of Man-based billionaire Doug Barrowman. Lady Moan is being investigated under several sections of the Lord's Code of Conduct, including a section saying peers must never accept or agree to accept any financial inducement as an incentive or reward for exercising parliamentary influence. She is also being investigated under a section of the Code saying peers must not seek by parliamentary means to confer exclusive benefit on an outside body or person, A, in which he or she has a financial interest, including by way of salary, fees, shareholding or other arrangements, or B, in return for payment or reward. Lord Foulkes said Lady Moan had failed to fully disclose her business interests in PPE MedPro and asked the commissioners to investigate whether she had breached the rules against lobbying when she referred the firm to the government. Mr. Page, the sole owner of PPE MedPro, is a wealth management expert who works for Barrowman's Knox House Trust, part of the Knox group of companies based on the Isle of Man, where Lady Moan and her husband live on a £25 million estate. In December, the Mail on Sunday revealed Mr. Page is the director of a firm that owns a luxury yacht called Lady M, on which Lady Moan sailed around the Adriatic last summer. Mr. Page is also the majority shareholder of Lady Moan's new business venture Neospace, which operates spaces for rent in Aberdeen. Lady Moan founded lingerie brand Ultimo through parent company MJM International in 1996. She was made a life peer by David Cameron in 2015. This article is by Jodie Harrison.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 29th of April 2022, from the sports section. Giovanni van Bronckhorst issues Ibrox rallying call ahead of Rangers Europa League date with Destiny. By Christopher Jack, senior Rangers writer. Giovanni van Bronckhorst has issued an Ibrox rallying call ahead of their Europa League date with Destiny. Rangers head into the second leg of their semi-final showdown, trailing 1-0 in the tie after a cruel defeat to RB Leipzig. Angelino netted the only goal of the game with minutes to spare, as Van Bronckhorst's side were left with nothing to show for their efforts. But the Dutchman knows that the tie is far from over now that Rangers will have the backing of a packed-out Ibrox next Thursday night. Van Bronckhorst said, "Yeah, that was my message to them as well. Of course you feel the disappointment in the locker room because of the late goal. But we're only halfway, and we've shown before our character to get back into our rhythm next week at home. That's what we have to do. There's not many times you have the chance to play in a European final, so we have to go all out and do everything to win the game. It's a different game next week. The second tie is always a different, because you know one team has to take risks because of the scoreline. I don't think we're going to play the same way like we did today. We have to win. We have to win by a margin of 2. Of course, one goal gets us back into the tie. But I think we're capable of doing that while respecting the quality of the opponent. We have had many great European nights at home, and the fans will definitely give us energy and give us all the ambience we need. My players should fight for the final." And that article was by Christopher Jack. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 29th of April 2022, from the sports section. Rangers James Tavernier pained by RB Leipzig defeat. By James Kearney, sports writer. James Tavernier admits that Angelino's late strike for RB Leipzig was a painful moment for him and his teammates, but the Rangers skipper is adamant that his side can turn things around in the second leg at Ibrox next week. Rangers lost 1-0. Giovanni van Bronckhorst's men defended bravely in Germany before shipping a spectacular late goal with 5 minutes to play. The two sides meet for the second leg in Govan next week, and Tavernier believes he saw enough from his team's performance to give him hope of reaching May's Europa League final in Seville. "I thought we were solid throughout the game," he told BT Sport. "We limited their chances, but we conceded it off a set piece where our organisation wasn't good. It cost us. It is obviously one great strike, but we could have prevented it. We are disappointed in that, but we know that at 1-0 and going to Ibrox for the second leg, we are still well in the game. We know what we can produce at home with our fans backing behind us. Away from home, we wanted to take a good result back to Ibrox, and it is only 1-0, so we know we are more than capable of turning this in our favour. We know we can get better going forward. We still created a couple of chances, and we limited them, but back at home, we can put in a really good performance. That's another thing. Next week we will have players coming back from injuries, so we'll be fitter and stronger. We are looking forward to it. I expect it will be a different game. They have a 1-0 lead, so they might be a little more defensive, but we are going to be fully at it from the first whistle. We are going to try and score as many goals as possible, and try and keep the ball out of the back of our net. We defended well today, and it was just a set piece that let us down, so we know we are capable of doing what we need to do." And that was an article by James Kearney. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 29th of April 2022, from the sports section, RB Leipzig boss Domenico Tedesco reveals Ibrox expectation ahead of Rangers Europa League showdown, by Christopher Jack. Domenico Tedesco reckons RB Leipzig will need to score at Ibrox to secure their spot in the Europa League final next week. The German Giants will take a 1-goal lead into the second leg of their semi-final showdown with Rangers, following a tight encounter on Thursday night. Defender Angelino netted the winner with just minutes to spare, as Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side were denied a famous draw that would have given them the edge in the tie. Van Bronckhorst has urged the Ibrox crowd to play their part in helping the champions mount a comeback and book a place in Seville against Frankfurt or West Ham United. And his RB counterpart believes Leipzig's narrow advantage won't be enough to guarantee progression, as he looks forward to a historic night in Govan. Tedesco said, "I'm sure we will cope at Ibrox. We are looking forward with happiness. We've played against Dortmund in front of 82,000. Ibrox is special and we're happy to be there in 1 week. I think we will need to score. They play easy, long balls that are dangerous. These type of long balls mean something can always happen. Free kicks, corner kicks. We saw against Dortmund, we were 3-0 up after 50 minutes and attended 4-2. And that article is by Christopher Jack. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 29th of April 2022. From the Voices section, letters. Be thankful for all the dull but honest council candidates. From today's Herald letters page. Neil Mackay is right to highlight the unacceptable behaviour and bigotry of some candidates standing in local elections next week. Local election reveals a circus of extremists, nutcases and half-wits. The Herald, April 28th. He is also right to show that no party or movement is entirely free of these people, although their presence should lead some parties, more than others, to consider overhauling their vetting processes. Nonetheless, I can't help feeling he is being a little unfair. He doesn't say how many clippings he has in his folder, but he lists only 10 examples of this kind of behaviour by candidates. According to the Ballot Box Scotland blog, which I recommend to everyone with an interest in these matters, there are 2,548 candidates standing in this election, so Mr Mackay is some way off showing that statistically significant proportion of candidates behave in the way he highlights. Of course, the stories in his folder are so shocking, not to say disheartening, that it's understandable if voters have a bad impression of council candidates and, by extension, the work of councils themselves and the value of this election. The overwhelming majority of council candidates across all parties and none will never end up in Mr Mackay's folder, and as a result are unlikely to be seen in the newspaper at all. Competence, advocacy, empathy and kindness are the qualities which make good councillors, but they are unlikely to generate many clicks or sell many papers. Candidates are significantly more likely to generate column inches if they do something horrendous than if they don't. As a result, many voters will have little other experience of these elections beyond stories from the gutter folder. In this context, it isn't surprising that turnout at a local authority election is significantly lower than in other elections. The decline in local newspapers is undoubtedly a factor, but characterising this election as a stramash of bigots and cooks doesn't help either. I hope people come out in their droves next Thursday to have their say in how their communities are run. They will still have some time left to get to know the candidates standing in their ward. In the main, they may be quite a dull bunch, but given the state of UK politics just now, that could be something to be thankful for. By David Tam MacDonald, candidate for Cardston, Netherley and Williamwood, SNP, Glasgow. Why Labour won't back Indy? Andy Stenton, letters April 28th, wants Scottish Labour to support Indy Ref 2. Here is his handy cut out and keep guide to pursuing that end. 1. Join the Labour Party. 2. Move a resolution at his local party along the lines of, this CLP rejects the principle that, by strength of our common endeavour, we achieve more than we achieve alone, and accept that all redistribution of resources, especially from the rest of the UK to Scotland, is a weakness, not a strength. Therefore, we demand that the Scottish Labour Party supports any Scottish nationalist demands for a further independence referendum, whether they feel like it. See how his fellow members react. That will put an end to it. Peter A. Russell, Glasgow. People peeved with census. Many people are scunnered with the 2022 census because of the questions it asked. The vast majority of the Scottish population don't speak Gaelic, so they would have to tick the box mark no skills in Gaelic. Why not ask about the skills in other languages too? What do you feel is your national identity is another question included to placate nationalists. Here the choice for the majority is between Scottish and other British. So you cannot be both British and Scottish at the same time, according to the SNP government. I wonder if the census information will be used by the 11 Scottish civil servants who have been instructed to prepare the ground for an illegal independence referendum to be held next year, according to Nicola Sturgeon. The annual salary total for this group of worthies is around £700,000. William Lonsky, Lauder. Ban phones from the Commons Chamber. The news that an elected Member of Parliament has been observed watching pornography on his smartphone in the debating chamber. Ministers face axe over sex claims and MP inquiry begins. The Herald, April 28th. It's appalling to say the least. The member is not worthy of being called honourable. He should be named, shamed and expelled as an MP as soon as possible. It would seem that it is common practice to send and receive messages whilst debates take place. It displays a deplorable lack of manners and courtesy to those fellow members who are speaking. It is high time the Speaker ruled that no smartphones are allowed in the chamber. Robin Johnson, Newton Mearns. Watching Prime Minister's questions from the House of Commons, I've often wondered why so many MPs, there to represent their constituents, spend the whole time on their mobile phones. At least now we have a clue. Maybe the latest furore will persuade MPs who have no interest in proceedings to put away their mobiles and at least pretend to be doing their job. Dougie Mahon, Dunblane. Watching television from the Parliament in London, I can't help noticing that there is a large table separating the two front benches. Why then does a Tory MP accuse Angela Rayner of the Labour front bench of crosses her legs in a provocative manner to distract Boris Johnson, whose view of said appendages is blocked by the table? Perhaps the Tory accuser is the same one who's been caught watching porn on his phone during a debate? Celia Judge, Ayr. Time to go back to coal. Andrew Mackie's suggestion of the simple way for a government to tackle the cost of living crisis. There is one simple way for government to tackle this awful cost of living crisis. The Herald, April 26. Prompts me to suggest a simple way of vastly reducing energy costs and somewhat reducing global warming both indirectly and directly. The situation would be utterly transformed by the simple expedient of reverting to coal firing for electricity generation. Apart from the relative cheapness, the use of coal-generated steam for producing baseload would minimise the use of horrendously expensive and polluting diesel and gas turbine power for rapid response augmentation. As correspondents who know what they're talking about have repeatedly pointed out, the more reliance there is on wind power for baseload, the more acute this problem becomes. The high visibility of pollution from coal burning obscures the fact that it is less pernicious than invisible diesel and gas pollution, and is rarely acknowledged that the visible pollution directly inhibits the ingress of solar radiation. However, our Western puritanical suspicion of anything that is either convenient or cheap ensures that a solution that would be both isn't even to be considered. Robin Dow, Rossi. Don't poke the Russian bear. The very dangerous situation that existed in Ukraine about 6 weeks ago looks to be a bit safer now, at least for us in this country, if not for those poor people involved in the eastern part of Ukraine in particular, and all those who have had to flee and who have relatives fighting to keep its Russians at bay. However, there is still a war going on, the situation is still unpredictable, and people are dying, and we don't know what the final outcome is going to be. If we are not careful, something very bad could still happen. At the moment, NATO and EU members have unity and discipline of purpose, and, given time, this will hopefully yield the results everyone is looking for. We have to maintain that unity and discipline of purpose, and wait for things to take effect. In this context, why do we have politicians and various other commentators spewing out inflammatory and bombastic rhetoric about Russia, drawing attention to themselves and giving Vladimir Putin much needed propaganda material? Do they not realise that he is listening to them too? The other thing I cannot understand is why we are telling the press precisely what type of weaponry we are sending and what training we are giving, as if that won't be useful to Russian intelligence. We should be doing everything we can do to help the people of the Ukraine, but people need to stop blurting out everything they do, intend to do, or think they should be doing. It is time that many of our politicians learn to keep their mouths shut and be a bit more discreet, and stop poking the bear. That is not going to help the situation, and if it does bite us, then we only have ourselves to blame. Victor Clements, Aberfeldy. And that was today's letters page from the Herald Scotland.
Herald Scotland recorded on Friday 29th of April 2022. Arts and Entertainments. The Enduring Secrets and Mystery of Skara Brae in Orkney by Susan Swarbrick, columnist and senior features writer. Like all good yarns, our tale begins in a dark and stormy night. It was in the winter of 1850 that high seas and ferocious winds battered the shores of Orkney, washing away part of the sand dunes that fringed the Bay of Scale, to reveal the clutch of ancient dwellings we now know as Skara Brae. It is a story that has captivated generations of Scots, with many of us having read spellbound The Boy with the Bronze Axe, the seminal children's book by Kathleen Fiddler, in our primary school classrooms. Published in 1968, the novel paints a vivid portrait of what life in the Neolithic village might have been like some 5,000 years ago. The plot centres on the adventures of siblings Callie and Brocken, rescued by a mysterious stranger called Tenko when they become trapped by the tides while collecting limpets. Their new friend arrives by boat and carries with him a glinting metal axe. Fiddler, who wrote more than 80 novels and non-fiction books during her prolific career, was inspired after a trip to Orkney where she visited Skara Brae and found herself fascinated by the mysterious site. Constructed from flat stone slabs and built into large mounds of midden, the houses are linked by a series of narrow passages. Each dwelling, comprising a single room, is furnished with fitted stone furniture including a dresser, 2 box beds, a central hearth and small tanks, possibly for preparing fish bait, set into the floor. Stone utensils such as hammers, axes and knives were also found, along with pottery and necklaces made from bone and animal teeth. Some signs pointed to the former inhabitants, who were likely farmers, hunters and fishermen, having left in a hurry, yet there was no evidence of battle, no corpses and no fire damage. This has led some to believe that the villagers of Skara Brae fled to escape a suffocating sandstorm, while others argue their departure could have been a more gradual process. Today, Skara Brae is managed by Historic Environment Scotland and considered the best preserved prehistoric settlement of its kind in Western Europe. It forms part of the UNESCO Heart of Neolithic Orkney World Heritage Site, along with Maeshowe, the Ring of Brodiger and the Stones of Stenness. Peering into the surviving adobes, there are 9, all but one of which can be viewed from the path above, raises goosebumps in anyone who loves history. Don't forget to pick up a souvenir copy of The Boy with the Bronze Axe in the gift shop. By Susan Swarbrick.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 2nd of May 2022, from the sports section, Celtic star Callum McGregor named PFA Scotland Player of the Year, by David Irvine. Celtic captain Callum McGregor is the PFA Scotland Player of the Year. The Scotland International claimed the top men's award at this evening's awards ceremony. McGregor also won his Club Player of the Year and Players Player of the Year prizes. The 28-year-old stepped up to replace Scott Brown as Celtic skipper in the summer after Ange Postecoglou was announced as manager. McGregor has been a key figure under Postecoglou this term, lifting the Premier Sports Club in December and is closing in on the Scottish Premiership crown. He's played 49 times so far this term across all competitions and has scored 4 and assisted 5. And that article was by David Irvine. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 2nd of May 2022, from the sports section, Celtic winger Liel Abada named PFA Scotland's Young Player of the Year, by David Irvine. Liel Abada has been named PFA Scotland's Men's Young Player of the Year. The young Celtic winger claimed the national award, having already bagged the same prize at his club awards night. Abada, 20, received the award beating competition from Callum Ramsey, Conor Barron and Josh Doig. The Israeli winger has enjoyed a terrific first season for Celtic, with no fewer than 26 goal contributions. He's netted 15 times and assisted 11 goals in 52 games so far this term for Celtic. Abada joined Celtic in the summer from Maccabi Petah Tikva for a reported £3.5 million fee. And that piece was by David Irvine. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 2nd of May 2022, from the sports section, Michael Stewart issues apology to former Rangers PR chief Jim Traynor, by Ewan Payton. Michael Stewart has issued an apology to former Rangers communications chief Jim Traynor. Over 2 years ago, the former Hearts captain appeared on BBC's Sports Sound show as he discussed the Ibrox club's head of communications at the time. Stewart is a regular contributor to the broadcast radio show, as well as their weekly sports scene TV coverage of Scottish football. During the show back in February 2020, Stewart referred to Traynor as a bully and someone who creates division for personal gain. It came during a discussion about an Alfredo Morelos interview, aired earlier in the day by Sky Sports, in which the Colombian striker said he had been subject to racial abuse in Scotland. Over 2 years on, Stewart has now apologised to Traynor, who is no longer at Rangers, for the upset and distress caused to him and his family. The ex-Hibs midfielder also said sorry to Rangers as he shared the apology on Twitter this morning. Stewart's statement reads, "I would like to apologise to Jim Traynor for comments about him on the BBC Sports Sound programme on Monday the February the 2nd, 2020, and any distress caused to him and his family. On the programme, I referred to Jim as a dangerous character, a bully, and someone who tries to create division for personal gain. I had no justification for those remarks and I withdraw them unreservedly. I realise my remarks and the subsequent social media storm caused Jim and his family a lot of upset, which I sincerely regret. I am also conscious that my remarks have caused embarrassment to Rangers Football Club, and I would like to apologise to them too." Traynor left Rangers 2 years ago, with David Graham taking over the role as Director of Communications at Ibrox. And that article is by Ewan Payton. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 2nd of May 2022, from the sports section. Analysis: Celtic 1, Rangers 1. Late fightback earned Rangers a moral victory at Parkhead, but not the meaningful win needed to halt Celtic. By Matthew Lindsay. The spirited fightback that Rangers staged against Celtic at Hampden last month earned them a place in the Scottish Cup final, and killed off their city rivals' hopes of completing a domestic treble this season. The late rally which the Ibrox club produced against the cinched Premiership leaders at Parkhead yesterday, while unexpected, admirable and impressive, has simply delayed the inevitable. The way that Ange Postecoglou's team has faded towards the end of the last two Old Firm matches has given some fans of Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side hope that they may stumble during the league run-in and suffer a catastrophic late collapse. But this result just means the Premier Sports Cup winners have to wait a little longer to be crowned Scottish champions. Callum McGregor and his fellow Celtic players dominated the long periods of the final derby encounter between the two age-old adversaries this term, and could have wrapped up a win which would have effectively, if not arithmetically, sewn up the title had it been more clinical in the final third. Daizen Maeda had two gilt-edged opportunities to net just before half-time and early in the second half, but he was unable to show the same ruthlessness as his teammate Jota, who had turned his delivery into the 6-yard box beyond Alan McGregor in the first half, had. That profligacy up front allowed the visitors to claw their way back into proceedings. It had been much the same story in the semi-final a fortnight earlier, after Greg Taylor gave Postecoglou's charges a deserved lead. On that occasion, Cameron Carter-Vickers' inability to convert a chance from 6 yards out proved fatal. Nothing should be taken away from Van Bronckhorst's men. They had been involved in a mentally and physically draining Europa League semi-final against RB Leipzig in Germany on Thursday night, but they looked far fresher in the closing stages and could easily have come from behind to triumph once again. Fashion Sakala levelled in the second half, following a good work by Scott Arfield, Scott Wright and Ryan Kent. Joe Hart then denied Arfield brilliantly after the midfielder got on the end of a right cutback. Sakala burst through and goal and then hit the post. There were other half chances too. The pocket of Rangers fans who had been shoehorned into a tiny corner of the stadium applauded and cheered their heroes off the park at the end of the 90 minutes. However, the holders needed to triumph yesterday to stand any chance of retaining their trophy, and they failed to do so. Celtic remain 6 points clear of their nearest challengers, but there are now just 3 games remaining. If they beat Hearts at home on Saturday, it will, due to their vastly superior goal difference, be impossible to catch them, and a win over Dundee United at Tannadice on Wednesday week will put them out of sight. Rangers had a big task ahead of them before kick-off. They had to end their rivals' 26-game unbeaten domestic run at home. Celtic last lost at Parkhead to Scottish opponents way back in January the 30th last year, when St Mirren won 2-1 in the Premiership, to keep alive their prospects of finishing first. Postecoglou's, whose men had romped an emphatic 3-0 triumph over their age-old adversaries in the East End of Glasgow back in February, had never suffered a home league defeat in the famous Old Stadium too. James Tavernier and his teammates started strongly and should have taken the lead in the 13th minute. Kent met a Tavernier delivery from the right with a first-time volley in the opposition area. However, the winger's attempt was well wide of the left post. It was not a day for Rangers to be passing up opportunities like that, and they paid the price for that glaring miss in the final third 8 minutes later when Celtic scored with their first meaningful attack. Taylor fed Maeda on the edge of the Rangers penalty box, and his teammate turned and ghosted past Connor Goldson before squaring to Jota. The wide man got himself ahead of Borna Barisic at the back post and fired beyond Alan McGregor with the outside of his right boot. Then Benfica Loni's strike raised the roof inside the stadium and visibly lifted his side. He nearly doubled Celtic's lead in the 32nd minute when Rio Hatate found him with a cross. His diving header, though, sailed over the crossbar. The industrious Maeda was inches away from netting shortly after half-time after being supplied by Jota. But Postecoglou would have been a happy man at half-time. His team were in complete control and their opponents were struggling to lay a glove on them. Goldson fired over and Sakala headed wide at a Tavernier corner earlier in the second half. But Celtic responded, and Maeda should have doubled their lead when he had McGregor to beat following some patient build-up play. Celtic retained the ball for long spells without testing McGregor, But the home support were enjoying the swagger their heroes were displaying, and it looked like only a matter of time before they forged further in front. It was a shock when Rangers equalised in the 67th minute. All of a sudden, the top flight leaders had a game in their hands. They were fortunate to survive an onslaught and pick up a point for their efforts. Amad Diallo came on for Arfield later on and picked up a booking from referee John Beaton within seconds for bringing down Leah Labada as he raced through in the Rangers' goal. Jota shelled the free kick high into the stands and it finished 1-1. The Premiership is as good as done too. And that was analysis by Matthew Lindsay, Chief Football Writer.
The Herald, Tuesday the 3rd of May 2022. News. Glasgow Hospital builder withdraws from faulty cladding repair talks. This article is by Caroline Wilson. The builders of Glasgow's flawed £842 million super hospital have withdrawn from discussions about faulty cladding that could pose a fire risk according to official documents. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde said Multiplex had advised that it will no longer engage in without prejudice meetings regarding repairs to the linings in the walls of the atrium of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. Board papers state that the Health Board has now appointed its own contractor and pre-construction repairs are well advanced. It emerged in March that concerns over fire retardant sheeting on cavity insulation had been raised to NHS bosses by the building's main contractor. If a fire were to occur, there are fears that it would spread rapidly through the 1,677-bed facility, with the potential to cause catastrophic consequences. NHS GGC is pursuing a £73 million legal claim against Multiplex, Capita Property and Infrastructure and Curry and Brown UK for design and construction defects at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital and the Royal Hospital for Children. They include systematic contamination of the water system and defects in ventilation systems, doors, glazing and heating. 2 further court summons were served to Multiplex in relation to the chilled water system in April 2021, for which the board is seeking an additional £18 million and internal cladding in March this year. The Health Board has been carrying out remedial works and the cost is being met by the Scottish Government ahead of the outcome of the legal case. The papers state, despite competitive dialogue, Multiplex have advised that they will no longer engage further in the without prejudice discussions regarding remedial works to cladding in the atrium building of the QEUH. This scenario was a known risk, and the mitigating position of a contractor directly appointed by NHS GGC is in place with progress on pre-construction activities well advanced. The board is also handling 28 civil claims in connection with treatment at both hospitals, where serious failings have been linked to a string of avoidable deaths. The claims have been sisted or put on hold, pending the public inquiry that was ordered after the deaths of 2 adults and a child from infections at the hospital linked to the water supply. Police Scotland have also launched a criminal investigation into 4 deaths at the QEUH and RHC, including that of a 10-year-old girl. Kimberly Darragh, the mum of Millie Main, who died while receiving cancer treatment in 2017, is among those to launch legal action against the Health Board. Millie was recovering from leukemia when her Hickman line, a catheter used to administer drugs, became infected. Multiplex challenged the legal action, which was lodged on January 22, 2020, on the grounds that it may be time-barred, but the appeal was rejected. The court subsequently refused Multiplex and Capital's motion for permission to appeal Lord Tyre's decision. However, board papers state there remains a possibility of an appeal at a later stage. A spokesman for NHS GGC said it was unable to comment while the legal process is ongoing. The Herald approached Multiplex for comment. In 2017, NHS GGC announced that cladding similar to that found on Grenfell Tower was to be removed from the exterior of the QEUH as a precautionary measure. The Health Board said it had been assured the hospital is an extremely safe building by Health Facilities Scotland and their National Fire Advisor. A public inquiry investigating infection deaths at the QEUH and Children's Hospital is due to resume this month and will focus on NHS Lothian hospitals built by Multiplex. The Royal Hospital for Children and Young People was due to open in July 2019, but was delayed after last-minute inspections found safety concerns over its ventilation systems. This article is by Caroline Wilson. The Herald, Tuesday the 3rd of May 2022. News. Police Scotland officer hit 14-year low. This article is by Andrew Learmorth. Police numbers in Scotland have fallen below 17,000 for the first time since 2008, according to the latest figures from the government. The quarterly strength statistics published on Tuesday revealed there were 16,805 full-time equivalent police officers in Scotland on the 31st of March 2022, down by 312 since the 31st of December 2021. The official figures include all police officers, including probationers undertaking Scottish Police College training. In 2007, the then SNP leader Alex Salmond set out plans for 1,000 extra officers and promised to maintain the extra police number in the 2011 election. That commitment meant that when Police Scotland was formed in 2013, there could never be less than 17,234 police officers. The last time numbers were below 17,000 was in the last quarter of 2008, when there were 16,675 officers. Scottish Liberal Democrat Justice spokesperson Liam MacArthur cautioned that the fall in police numbers was happening as violent crime spiked. Figures released last month showed violent crime was also at its highest for a decade at 9,842 recorded offences, a 12% rise on the previous year. It was the highest figure since 2010-11, when 11,437 such crimes were recorded. For non-sexual violent crime, although murders and robberies were down year on year, there were increases in attempted murder and serious assault and domestic abuse. However, the main driver was a 37% jump in other violence, which includes threats and extortion, including cybercrimes, as well as cruelty to children and abductions. Mr MacArthur said, on Nicola Sturgeon's watch, violent crime is on the rise, yet the SNP are presiding over a decline in officer numbers. There are now fewer than at any time since 2008. Police officers and staff work tirelessly in a stressful job to keep our communities safe. They are being hampered by a lack of resources, the loss of valuable civilian expertise, a lack of mental health support and outdated IT systems. The Justice Secretary needs to set out a new plan of action for reducing violent crime and making sure that Police Scotland has the staff and equipment it needs to make that happen. The Scottish Conservative Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Jamie Green, described the drop as shocking. He said, "This consistent neglect of our police service has undoubtedly made our streets less safe, and now violent crime is at its highest in a decade. We already know that local authorities have been forced to cut officer numbers due to SNP funding cuts, while the SNP's centralisation of the police has meant patrols are less noticeable since the forces were merged. There has also been a cut of more than 900 officers to local police divisions since 2013, and when our police tried to secure the funding necessary to tackle crime, the SNP instead handed them a real terms cut to their capital budget." In February, Police Scotland's Chief Constable Ian Livingston warned the Scottish Police Authority, SPA, that there could be a fall in numbers because of natural retirements and attrition, and a longer than usual gap between intakes of new recruits because of COP26. He told the SPA these necessary and important measures for coronavirus and the impact that was previously outlined of COP26 on recruitment and training and availability of training facilities means there has been a longer period between intakes than would normally be the case. Inevitably, this has implications on officer numbers over this COVID and COP26 period. We are required to report officer numbers on a quarterly basis, and in December of 2021, full-time equivalent number of officers was 17,117. Now, that is some 115 officers fewer than when we reported in the previous quarter of September 2021. With natural retirements and attrition, our overall number of officers will indeed reduce further when the statistics are next reported in April, and I think it's important that I am very clear on this matter. This article is by Andrew Learmonth.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.